And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Popular Culture Association's Radio Division Players present an adaptation of Michael C. Keith's short story, The Gravitron Twister.
On a hot, dusty Sunday afternoon in late July of 1964, KOVS morning DJ Harry Wilmot had ridden the Gravitron Twister for 56 consecutive hours, setting a record that would stand for half of a century. There had been 3 attempts by DJs to break the record, and all had failed. Each subsequent challenge over the years, however, served to significantly increase notice of the small AM radio station serving western Oklahoma. And now the station's owner, Lyle Covey, fervently, if not desperately, hoped history would repeat itself on this 4th attempt to best the legendary feat of a long-dead radio personality. With the recent hire of a talented 19-year-old straight out of DJ school in Tulsa, whose on-air moniker was Prentice Outlaw, his real name was Kaminsky, Lyle thought he might be able to turn things around at the down-on-its-luck radio station. This was Prentice's first on-air gig, and he was anything but polished, but he did have a folksy charm and a sense of humor and a deep, resonant voice unique in someone of his age. Covey was already hearing positive comments about him despite his short time doing the morning show. In 2 weeks, Prentice had already attracted the attention of a local Ford dealer that had agreed to underwrite Outlaw's challenge on the Gravitron Twister when the Kelly Brothers Carnival returned to town for the annual West Oklahoma Fair. Not only was Prentice a quickly growing presence on the Cobb's airwaves, his tall, good looks made him an attractive off-air person as well. Word soon spread around town that the new DJ looked like a young Robert Redford. As testimony to his appeal, the local high school cheerleading team actually showed up at the station during the morning show and, to the everlasting delight of Covey, performed a routine that incorporated the station's call letters and the young DJ's name.
Can you give us a K? Can you give us an O? Can you give us a B? Can you give us an X for the greatest outlaw morning show?
Cobb's AM program director and midday man Ron Savage, proud creator of the station liner "The Savage Follows the Outlaw," recorded the cheer and used it as the morning program's promotional jingle. In less than a month, Prentice had become something of a phenomenon, and Covey was certain his upcoming stint on the Gravitron Twister would put the station back in the black. During his program, Prentice talked non-stop about his plans to shatter the long-standing record of Harry Wilmot, and he did so not out of bravura, but out of complete confidence.
It's not so much the ride itself, it's pretty tame. It's the non-stop rotating that gets you.
No, I don't get motion sick. My daddy used to spin me around for hours, and I couldn't get enough.
Well, 56 hours is a heck of a long time to go around in circles. And old Wilmot himself said he felt like the ground was moving under him for days after he got off the darn thing. Of course, you're a lot younger than he was when he did it, so it may not affect you that way. The other DJs that tried to break the record were a good deal older than you, so you may have an advantage in that department.
Well, I'm due 72 hours on it. What do you think? Make it so nobody ever beats my record.
Well, you don't have to spend that much time on it, but it sure would be great if you could break the record.
Consider it done, Mr. Covey.
On his show, the day of the challenge, he announced his plans to ride the Gravitron Twister for 3 days straight and added to the challenge by vowing to consume 50 of the fair's famous cream custards during that time. The rules of the contest required that Prentice not leave the ride and that it only stopped rotating long enough to pick up other riders during the operating hours of the fair. Otherwise, it would continue to move without interruption day and night. In order to accommodate the call of nature, a porta potty was installed and a bench was removed to create space for an air mattress that the DJ could sleep on. Most of the time, Prentice would be stationed in one of the rocket seats that proved a tight fit for his long and gangly torso. At different intervals, he would broadcast from the ride and read commercials for the Ford dealerships sponsoring the event. As the ride spun, the young DJ waved and hooted at the young girls gathering to watch him make history. And in response, they chanted, "Go, outlaw, go!" and blew him kisses of encouragement. By mid-afternoon, Prentice had happily devoured 12 of the carnival's famous custard puffs and felt he should have pledged to eat at least 100 of the delectable pastries. When night came, Prentice snuggled into a sleeping bag and fell asleep into a very deep, luxurious slumber. Midway through the night, he was awakened by a bulging bladder and took to the occasion to relieve himself off the ride of the slowly spinning ride, since the fairground was deserted. While he emptied himself of accumulated soda pop, the scene swirling around him took on the aspect of day, and in the field where the Kelly Brothers Amusements had set up shop, there now appeared cavalry aiming their rifles at a gathering of Indians. When the first shot was fired, Prentice ducked behind one of the rocket cars and slowly peeked out. As quickly as the bizarre scene had appeared, it was gone, replaced by the dark runway of concessions and game kiosks. Prentice continued peering out onto the deserted fairway, expecting things to morph again. After an hour when nothing did, he returned to his sleeping bag and conked out, thinking the whole spectacle had been a weird side effect of 20 hours on the Gravitron Twister and his huge intake of sugar. Shortly after sunrise, he was up and feeling well rested. A few carnival workers were out and about as well, and cleaning the grounds of the preceding evening's trash. Prentice consumed 3 more custards for breakfast and washed them down with a thermos of coffee provided by Covey, who interviewed him for the morning show as the second day of the stunt got underway.
Well, folks, we're here with Prentice Outlaw, who has just spent his first night going in circles as he attempts to set a new record for continually riding the Gravitron Twister. How you feeling, Mr. Outlaw?
Never better. Had a good night's sleep and ate my last 20th cream puff for breakfast. It's going to be a great day, and I hope all you out there listening to KOBS come on down and cheer me on.
Well, we can start that right now, Prentice.
Can you give us a K? Can you give us an O? Can you give us a B? Can you give us an S? For the greatest outlaw morning show.
As the morning progressed, the crowd watching Prentice pursue Harry Wilmot's half-century record grew. Lyle Covey could not contain his joy with the massive turnout, and on several occasions rode the ride with Prentice to encourage him to stay the course, which was not necessary because the young DJ had no intention of abandoning his promise to become the new record holder. The way things were going, thought Covey, if his morning man could remain on the air for another couple of days, the publicity would give the station the boost it sorely needed. By the end of the second day on the Gravitron Twister, Prentice had devoured 37 custards and still felt no ill effects of the steady rotating. In fact, his excitement and enthusiasm were building as he neared the record set by Harry Wilmot, which Covey calculated would occur around 1 p.m. the next day. That night, Prentice estimated the crowd of admirers and curiosity seekers to be in the hundreds, with many shouting words of encouragement to his great satisfaction.
Good morning, KOBS listeners. This is the big day. Will Prentice Outlaw beat the Harry Wilmot's 50-year-old record? Well, in less than 7 hours, we'll know. So I want everybody to come on down to the fairgrounds and cheer him on. He looks a little peaked this morning, so I think he could use your encouragement.
After exchanging a few on-air words for the home audience, Prentice told Covey about what he'd witnessed earlier that morning, or what he thought he had experienced that morning.
Oh, you better cut back on those cream custards, Prentice. All that sugar and starch can make you see things, and your head gets jangled from all that spinning, too. Nothing out of the ordinary, I suppose. Well, maybe that's what happened to the other guys who tried to beat Wilmot's record. I didn't own the station back then, but I did hear tell that they thought they'd seen things too. Maybe it's the ghost from the Washita battlefield out there past the park's visitor station.
There was an Indian battle over there.
Old Custer massacred over 100 people, they say, mostly women and children.
General Custer?
Colonel Custer. He wasn't a general then. Anyway, don't let your imagination carry you away. No paranormal stuff going on with you, just indigestion and vertigo. Hang in there a few more hours and you'll be the new reigning Gravitron Twister champion with a big, adoring morning show audience.
The closer Prentice came to reaching Wilmot's 56-hour record, the larger the crowd ringing the Gravitron Twister. The roar of "Go, Outlaw, Go!" resounded at such booming decibels that the calliope music that blared constantly was drowned out. Prentice's intake of cream custard had slowed somewhat, but he was determined to fulfill his promise to eat 50 and believed he'd reach the goal by the time he hit his 72-hour mark the next morning. An hour before the infamous Wilmot record was about to be eclipsed by Prentice Outlaw, the crowd surrounding the Gravitron Twister spilled far beyond the fairgrounds. The whole experience so exceeded what Corey had expected that he was giddy with goodwill toward his young DJ and promised him a raise and other perks before Prentice had even broached the subject.
Hey, we can get you a Ford Focus to drive from the dealer. How'd you like to do a remote broadcast from the showroom next week? How about that, Prentice?
I like the Fusion better.
No, I think you'll go for that.
1 minute before the makeshift clock set up in front of the Gravitron Twister reached the Wilmot record, the crowd began counting down. And when the second hand swept past the top of the hour, it erupted in deafening cheers. Prentice raised his arms and jogged around the ride in victory. Midway through his second loop, he let out a series of thunderous farts that only he could hear because of the din of the shouting onlookers. The effect of the gaseous release was mana to his considerably constricting abdomen and allowed him to consume 2 more cream puffs for the benefit of his adoring fans.
After 50 years, we have a new Gravitron Twister champion. Let's hear it for Prentice Outlaw of the KOBS Morning Show.
Thanks, y'all, for being here, and I hope y'all come back in the morning when I make it 72 hours.
The rest of the afternoon, Prentice was able to snooze at intervals between live broadcast reports of his ongoing feat. Until late afternoon, thunderstorm roared across the prairie, forcing him to take refuge in the porta potty until the lightning abated. When he emerged, the fairway was empty and remained deserted until the carnival doused its lights for the night. The shut-eye Prentice managed to cobble together during the day left him alert as he reluctantly anticipated a return of the Washita battle scene. He wondered if he might be able to intervene in the massacre, do something to keep the slaughter from happening, but he had no idea what. Besides, he thought, what can you do to change something that has already occurred? Or how can you alter an illusion? It was all some kind of weird mirage conjured by his frazzled imagination, he figured, and there was nothing he could do but watch it like he might a disturbing movie. The hours passed slowly and uneventfully, and eventually Prentice drifted off only to be awakened by something he first took as thunder. When his eyes opened, the sky was indeed flashing with brilliant light, but it was light from the muzzles of 100 rifles. Prentice backed away from the front of the Gravitron Twister and took up his familiar viewing post behind a rocket seat. Leading the right flank of the charging line of cavalry was the man he assumed was the infamous Indian fighter George Armstrong Custer. Soon, the scene before Prentice was awash in violence, and he could no longer remain passive. He shouted for the brutality to stop, but nothing slowed the attack. Then he decided to take action and heave something at Custer when he neared the Gravitron. But the only thing available were 2 cream custard puffs that he had put off eating until he reached his 72-hour goal. Nonetheless, in an act of desperation, he grabbed the pastries and hurled them at the colonel. When he rode within a few feet, the dessert struck the Indian fighter on the shoulder, causing him to look skyward for a winged creature which may have defecated on him. Prentice was delighted by his marksmanship, but when the colonel peered in his direction, obviously looking for the source of the sticky gook splattered on his uniform, he took refuge behind the rocket seat again. For a brief moment, Custer looked exactly in his direction, but his eyes responded as if nothing were in front of him but the vast prairie. It was then Prentice realized he and the Gravitron Twister were invisible to the notorious Dragoon. They were objects in another dimension in time. Prentice gave a full account of the experience to Lyle Covey, who arrived at the fairgrounds just before dawn. While Covey listened attentively, his thoughts were clearly taken up with the climax of his DJ's singular feat, which would be broadcast live in an hour. Corey was accompanied by the town's newspaper photographer, and shortly after their arrival, the local cable access channel crew appeared at the site.
This is the big moment, Prentice. You okay? I mean, seemed a little shaky, but, well, that's understandable.
No, I'm fine, no problem, but I used up the last 2 custards I was going to eat to reach my record.
Well, I'll go find some. In the meantime, get ready for your close-up, as they say.
By the time the big moment had arrived, Prentice was filled with excitement. But he was also experiencing a churning in his belly unlike anything he had ever felt before. He was hopeful it would settle down once he got off the ride. At precisely 7 o'clock as planned, the Gravitron Twister was brought to a stop, and Prentice took his first tentative step onto solid ground while devouring the last of his 50 custards. He attempted to steady himself by gripping a light post as Covey prepared to broadcast. Despite the early hour, a crowd had gathered and it applauded wildly while the cheerleader jingle played repeatedly about KOBS. As the local cable station camera began to roll and the newspaper photographer began snapping pictures one after the other, Covey proudly detailed the DJ's miraculous accomplishment, culminating in his introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, KOBS listeners everywhere, I give you the all-time Gravitron Twister Championship, Mr.
It was at that auspicious moment that the contents of Prentice Outlaw's defiled innards erupted like Mount Vesuvius, dousing Covey and a half-dozen others near him with the sour effluvia of his 72-hour diet. Unlike Prentice, who was deeply embarrassed by the headline, "Another Custard Massacre," and photos on the front page of the next day's paper, Lyle Covey was ecstatic, since he held Mark Twain's reputed view that there was no such thing as bad publicity.
Can you give us a K? Can you give us an O? Can you give us a B? Can you give us an S? For the greatest outlaw morning show!
This is based on a true story. I worked at a radio station in central Massachusetts in my early career, W-A-R-E, Ware, Massachusetts, right? You know that one, Donna, right? And we had a fellow by the name of Prentice Outlaw and a fellow by the name of Ron Savage. And I did the shift between them, so I would always say, here I am between an outlaw and a savage. And the station got the idea that, yeah, let's put him on this merry-go-round and do a live remote and let him, and for 3 days he stayed on that merry-go-round.